The inner mansions. We bloomed in spring. Our bodies are the leaves of God. The apparent seasons of life and death, our eyes can allow. But our souls dear, I will just say this forthright, they are God Himself. We will never perish unless He does. Poetry by Saint Teresa of Avila, 1515–1592 AD. The first mansion considers our first experiences growing up in a family. Considers how we enter within through prayer and meditation. Considers the new birth of the soul, and how we are like a temple with the Divine Spirit dwelling within. While calling upon our Master today that He would speak through me, and as I had no conscious idea about how to convey the glories and mysteries of our soul, a picture occurred to me which I will now set down, in order to have some foundation on which to build. I began to think of the soul like a castle comprised of 7 mansions within, each successively more glorious than the first, and at the center of them a pure and brilliant sun. Now, if we think carefully over this, brothers and sisters, the soul of the righteous person is a heavenly dwelling which God delights in. Proverbs 8:31. What do you think a dwelling place would be like which is the delight of a God so mighty, so wise, so pure and so full of all that is good? To what can we compare the great beauty of a soul and its great capacity, for we are made in God's likeness and image. Let us make a good effort to comprehend the beauty of the soul and its glorious mansions, for our soul is the temple. So let us begin our conception of the soul's great dignity and beauty. It is a pity if through initial lack of vision we do not understand ourselves or know who we are. Would it not be a sign of great ignorance if a person were asked who he is, and could not say, and had no idea who his father or his mother was, or from what country he came? Though that would be ignorance, our own is so much greater if we make no attempt to discover what we are, and only could know that we live in these bodies, and have a vague idea, because we have heard it, that we possess souls. And further, if we do not inquire what good qualities there may be in our souls, or who dwells within them, or how precious they are, and if we seldom consider carefully preserving and cultivating our soul's beauty, how much we miss if our interest is mostly in the rough setting of the diamond, and of the outer wall beyond the castle, that is to say, in these bodies of ours. How is the first mansion within like a part of our soul? Let us imagine now that this castle or temple, as I have said, contains mansions, some above, others below, others at each side, and in the closest circle to that sun the chief mansion where the most secret things pass between God and the soul. I recently attended a wedding which took place over several days in Mexico on a beautiful oceanside setting. Some large estates which had lain vacant had been joined together and beautifully fixed up for special occasions such as this wedding. The beauty, joy and comfort of the setting is very much like the life of the soul which I am wanting to describe to you. There were several distinctive homes for guests to stay in, joined together by the courtyards they shared. All the dwellings enjoyed the one ocean, one sky, the one sun and one full moon at night. Each casa was like a gorgeous mansion, and each was quite different from the others. There were so many casas and rooms to see, that it was not possible to visit all of them in one weekend. Each casa had its special offerings, right on up to the bridal suite itself. Let us now consider our beautiful and delightful castle and how we may enter its first mansion. I may seem to be talking nonsense, for if the castle is the soul, there can clearly be no question of our entering it. For we ourselves are the castle. It would be absurd to tell someone to enter a room when he was already in it. But we must understand there are many ways of being in a place. Many persons remain in the outer court of the castle, which is the place occupied by the guards. They are not interested in entering it, and have no idea what is in that wonderful place, or who dwells in it, or even how many rooms it has. You will have read certain books on prayer which advise the soul to enter within itself, and that is exactly what this means. Souls without prayer are like people whose bodies or limbs are paralyzed. They possess feet and hands but they cannot make them move. In the same way, there are souls so infirm and so accustomed to busying themselves with outside affairs that it seems nothing can be done for them, and it seems as though they are incapable of entering within themselves at all. So accustomed they have grown to living all the time with the reptiles and other creatures to be found in the outer court of the castle that they have almost become like them. And although by nature they are so richly endowed as to have the power of conversing even with God, unless they make steps to realize their miserable condition and to remedy it, their paralysis remains. As far as I can understand, the door of entry is prayer and meditation. If a person does not think, or meditate upon whom he is addressing, and what he is asking for, and who it is that is asking, and of whom he is asking, he may not be praying at all though he be constantly moving his lips. Let us say no more, then, of these paralyzed souls, who, unless the Lord himself comes and commands them to rise, are like the man who had lain beside the pool of Siloam for 38 years. Let us think of certain other souls who do eventually enter the castle grounds, and open the door to its first mansion. Although very much absorbed in worldly affairs, their desires are good. Sometimes, though infrequently, they seek the Master. They think about their souls, but not very carefully. Full of 1,000 preoccupations, they pray only occasionally, and as a rule they think all the time of their preoccupations, for they're very much attached to them, and where their treasure is, there is their heart also. Matthew 6:21. From time to time, however, they shake their minds free of them, and it is a great thing that they should know themselves well enough to realize they're not going the right way to reach the door of the first mansion waiting before them. Eventually they enter the first rooms on the lowest floor, but so many reptiles have troubled their path to the door, that they are at first unable to appreciate the beauty of the mansion or to find much peace within it. Still, they have done a great deal by entering at all, and it is an auspicious beginning. The first mansion, beautiful and resplendent, can still be somewhat of a shadowy experience. The sun is lower on the horizon in this first and outer mansion, and the shadows cast by its furnishings can seem to loom large and can distract the gaze from the many lovely things arrayed for the soul to experience. As with a room not recently, or ever used, the shuttered windows must be opened by the will. The mansion is perfectly prepared by the divine lover, but the beloved must take action now to tune the musical instruments of mirth therein, to set out and press the tablecloths and tapestries of fellowship, and the wine of merriment must be uncorked and allowed to breathe. The figs, golden apples and pomegranates, spiritual fruits of love, joy and peace must be set upon their artful platters to be appreciated. There are many fine cabinets and larders, but they may be opened only by the learned attention of the inner life, from which all lasting values spring. All these activities described have to do with the inner life, the life of the soul. However, each has a counterpart in the outer life. Each person first experiences birth, youth and growing up in a family, and perhaps followed by marriage and having children. These are the initial soul-growing experiences of earthly life. A person who raises a child, or who helps instruct children, such as a teacher, an aunt, uncle, family friend, or sibling, gains essential soul-shaping knowledge through that experience. The young child does not understand the wise restraint his parents guide him with. When the child becomes an adult, he shows appreciation for the loving protection and education he received, and this is especially known and felt when he in turn raises his own child. I recently counseled a middle-aged adult deprived of sufficient parental guidance as a child, who now still feels the childish reactions when corrected or guided. She says people who want to help are trying to control her with their own agenda, are treading upon her space as if she was a doormat, and she reports that her successive personal relationships repeatedly go badly in a continuing cycle. Dear God, grant us all that we can enter our own inner citadel, and there in the warm light of our divine spouse sent from you, make up for all deficiencies of upbringing and unfortunate heredity. So let it be. To be more specific, entrance into the first mansion awakens the person and his soul, through the ministry of wisdom, to first perceive he is not just a citizen of earth, but as a member of the family of God is also potentially a cosmic, universe citizen. There is so much to learn here. The work is almost all about making up for intellectual and spiritual deficiencies, learning the basics of character development. The three divine powers working to lead the pilgrim to the new birth and entrance to the first mansion are Christ's Spirit of Truth, and the Universe Mother's Holy Spirit, and the Divine Spirit sent from the Heavenly Father to indwell the individual mortal mind. Here, in this incredible mansion, the human being develops the powers of personal choice, individual decision, moral responsibility, and the capacity for spiritual individuality. Why are numerous terms used to refer to the personally indwelling Divine Spirit? The nature of the indwelling Divine Spirit is so sublime, so fascinating and remarkable that it is nearly impossible to find terms in human language fitting to name or describe this gift. Therefore, numerous terms are used in various settings in the attempt to portray as faithfully as possible this remarkable endowment. The following terms will be used interchangeably, and all referred to the same divine endowment. Divine Spirit, Divine Spouse, the Spirit of your mind, a term used by the Apostle Paul, Divine Gift, Divine Guide, Divine Monitor, Divine Lover, Mystery, Gift of the Father, God with us, Eternal Partner, Adjuster, and Divine Friend. Other terms may be employed and have been used by saints throughout history. These terms are not to be confused with the Spirit of Truth from Christ, or with the Holy Spirit omnipresent bestowals given worldwide and universe-wide. The birth of the soul. Before moving forward from the first mansion and looking into the glories of the next mansion of our soul, now is a good time to pause, and back up to the time just before the soul itself was birthed, before any of the mansions could take form. The discovery of one's own soul and the thrill of adventure in its first mansion is marvelous, as only those who have experienced it can report. However, this experience with the light of divinity illuminating the chambers of our own mind would not all be possible if the soul were not first conceived, created and born. Just as our physical bodies do not simply spontaneously appear, but rather are born from minute particles of great potential shared from the parents, so also the soul has its intelligent and parental origin. At our birth we come into this world with a mind and body able to eat, sleep, play, work and think. As we continue in this life, something wonderful occurs at about age 5 or 6 for each child. At that age, when the child makes his first individual, volitional, and personal moral decision, then quietly and unannounced, the child's divine spirit arrives within the child's mind. This is the birth of the soul for every person. Saint Catherine the mystic poet of Siena, Italy wrote, "I first saw God when I was a child, 6 years of age. The cheeks of the sun were pale before him, and the earth acted as a shy girl, like me. Divine light entered my heart from his love, that did never fully wane. Though indeed, dear, I can understand how a person's faith can at times flicker. I have seen what you want, it is there. A beloved, of infinite tenderness. By Saint Catherine of Siena 1347–1380. The saints who have walked the contemplative path know there are few actual miracles in life and in the cosmos. Truly, everything is quite amazing about life, and we can generally see the whos and wherefores if we look thoughtfully. However, some things are so sublime, some gulfs spanned are so great, and some acts of love and transcendence are so marvelous, that we are simply left in awe and worship when we behold them. So it is with the birth of the soul. Saint Teresa of Avila Spain wrote about the soul in the 1500s. When your soul was born, it was like a still ocean that had yet to experience its infinite life. God then came to the shores of our soul, and gazed upon the immaculate splendor that his divine heart created. He then took off his clothes and dove into us. Nothing on their own have your arms ever done, the movements of your feet are caused by the waves he stirred. By Saint Teresa of Avila. Is the new soul of both human and divine origin? The young human mind, full of vast potential, waits. The human mind is not to be confused with the brain or any physical organ, but is our endowment from birth, from the infinite, the source of all mind. Then from the center of centers of all universes, in transit from paradise arrives a perfect and pure sun, a fragment from the great mother wheel of stars, mystery, God with us, our divine spouse-to-be, our eternal partner. This arrival from paradise is the seed of divinity planted within the soil of the human mind. It is the divine spermatozoa penetrating the human ovum of the mind. It is the divine sun finding its galactic location at the center of a new personal solar system. This new creation is not just of the divine spirit, or just of the human mind, but is a novel creation of the union of both. A new creation of synergistic qualities bridging the eternal and infinite God with the mortal of time and space. This new creature is the soul. The arrival of this divine spirit from paradise carries with it the ideal blueprints as projected for the new soul, the architecture of the ideal life plans waiting to be discovered within the 7 mansions of the soul. Having considered now the birth of the soul within the human mind, and the opening of the first mansion within this great castle, we now turn our attention to the next, the second mansion.
The second mansion considers the idea of greater soul growth brought about through working and living with others. Considers the divine embrace through meditative prayer and worship. The movement from one mansion to the next is not in a straight line, for each swirls in its own orbit. Similarly, our personality development requires we sincerely chart with a whole heart and with intelligence our pathway inward toward destiny. Personal relationships were developed and experienced in the context of family in the first mansion, and in this second mansion the idea is carried forward into learning to relate within social groups. While it is impossible to precisely define these 7 psychic circles of human growth, new levels of maturity signal the appreciation of new meanings and values. Here it becomes more possible through the increasing warmth and closeness of our divine spouse to deal with and find cures for intellectual conflict and mental disharmony. Psychologists have tendered many ideas of human mental growth, including the concept of growth periods of roughly 7 years each. Religionists have postulated concepts of psychic development, such as the 7 chakra system of the Hindus, starting with the root chakra and culminating in the crown. Philosophers have attempted to correlate scientific observations with religious phenomena of spiritual awakenings. All of these concepts are partial and many are arbitrary, but they all perhaps contain a grain of truth that man has a soul of development potential. How does working with others bring about our inner soul growth in the second mansion? The monastic literature is full of references about devotees sorely challenged by their close social contact with certain other persons who are difficult to harmonize with. All of us are thrown into close living contacts and the inevitable difficult relationships, and we also enjoy the company of persons who seem to understand, and who love us as soul companions, kindred spirits. Often we find ourselves required to work with those who are very different from us in background and makeup, mentally, racially and socially. These social situations call upon all our soul powers of enlightenment to overcome disagreements, cross-purposes, and all types of unfathomable differences. Social misfits and those who become exhausted through contact with others may attempt to withdraw from society. Any of us who endeavor to walk the streets of society without soul insight are like unto a man who sets out on a journey without provisions or map, or a workman who begins a project without tools. The exterior world provides the plane of action, our encounters with others provides the psychic fulcrum for personal growth through service to others. Saint Francis of Assisi wrote this poetry in the 1200s. I think God might be a little prejudiced. For once he asked me to join him on a walk through this world. And we gazed into every heart on this earth, and I noticed he lingered a bit longer before any face that was weeping, and before any eyes that were laughing. And sometimes when we passed the soul in worship, God, too, would kneel down. I have come to learn, God adores his creation. By Saint Francis of Assisi, 1182–1226. A sister I know very well worked at an orphanage many years as a cook. When a new cook arrived one day to assist, this new arrival insisted on being the head cook. The sister cared not for titles, and the higher position paid just a trifle more. The sister's stipend was only a couple of $100 a month anyway. She cared not about it and willingly gave the new arrival the higher position. Years later, after this dear sister had served 19 years cooking for the children, the former head cook returned for a visit, and what loving fellowship they enjoyed seeing each other again. The sister felt it was all more than worth her small sacrifice to bring a blessing to another. These things can only be taught and learned in the citadel of the spirit. Robert Bly and Brother Lawrence have both written about the importance of kitchen work where the soul learns humility and deference to others. Living in this way makes every day a joy in the family of God. How does the soul learn the lessons it needs in order to be of greater service? The outer world provides the opportunities to serve and network, but it cannot supply the insight to do so. Only the insight of the progressing soul in close communion with the Divine Spirit can equip us. Herein lies the inestimable value and necessity of the second mansion. Here our monitor of mystery can rehearse with us in the secret garden those truths which can make us socially fragrant and useful. Here the light is brighter and clearer than in the first mansion where we learned our first and preparatory lessons. Let us now come to consider further who the souls are that enter the second mansion and what they do there. In some ways these souls have a harder time than those in the first mansions, but they are in less peril for they seem to understand their position and there is great hope they will get farther into the castle. The souls in the first mansions are, it seems, nearly unable to hear or to speak, and this is a great trial. These souls in the second mansion encounter greater trials but can understand better when the Divine Spirit calls them, for as they draw nearer to where Majesty dwells, the Divine is recognized as a loving friend to them. The friend's mercy and goodness is so great, that even when we are engaged in our worldly pastimes and business and pleasures and hagglings, our friend ceaselessly draws us to companionship, time after time, so great is the desire that we approach. And the voice is so sweet that the poor soul is consumed with love, to do the friend's bidding immediately. Likewise, how our grief is multiplied when we miss the mark through sin and error. The divine friend may speak to us through the conversations of good people, through spiritual teachings, through the scriptures, or through the reading of good books, and there are many ways in which we are called. But most importantly, we discover the divine embrace through meditative prayer and worship, in the sanctum sanctorum of the mansions the friend has provided for our soul's dwelling place of nourishment, rest and communion. Even if our prayers are feeble, the great friend values them highly, even from those who are worried and burdened down through cares. Our dear Majesty is quite prepared to wait many days and even years, and wonderfully so when it is seen we are persevering and have good desires. Yet, oh, what confusion the great deceiver of fear can bring to such a soul, and how distressed it can become not knowing whether to proceed further, or return to the room where it was before. O Divine Spirit! It is here we need your aid, without which we can do nothing. Through your ministry of mercy, help this soul to not be deluded and led astray when its journey is just begun. At this crossroad reason tells the soul how mistaken it is in thinking that the former things are of the slightest value by comparison with what it now seeks. Faith instructs the soul in what it must do to find satisfaction. Memory shows it how the former ways fall away like unneeded scaffolding as the new and living way is lifted up and illuminated. Outside the castle the soul will find neither security nor peace. Let it refrain from going house to house when its own house is so full of good things. How fortunate the soul is to find all it needs at home, where its host puts all good things into its possession, unless, like the prodigal son, it desires to go astray and eat the food of the swine. Luke 15:15. The strengthened will is moved to love the one who has shown so many signs of love, some of which it would like to return. In particular, the will shows the soul how this true lover never leaves it, but goes with it everywhere and gives it life and being. When encountering outward trials, remember that Majesty knows best what is suitable for us, even the perfect and custom trial designed to save our ease-drifting souls. It is not for us to advise the Divine Spirit what to give us, for the Divine can rightly reply that we know not what we ask. Matthew 20:22. We are called to be resolute and prepare with all possible diligence to bring our will into conformity with the will of God. This is the road to perfection. If we then sometimes fall, let us not lose heart or cease efforts to make progress, for even out of a fall, God will bring good.
The third mansions. The soul becomes more teachable. Self-examination is compared with self-forgetfulness. The new language of love, beyond words, is learned. The watchword of the third mansions is training. The spiritual student's education in the first and second mansions has been spent in a sort of catch-up mode, with the divine spouse lovingly guiding through and in the heart making up for deficiencies in the family and social life. Now education earnestly takes on a decidedly more positive quality. The student at the first mansion became aware of the bestowed Spirit of truth from Christ, and of the enfoldment of the Holy Spirit given from Christ's consort, the Universe Mother, always present and supporting. He learns who his Creator is, Christ, and who his co-creator and Divine Mother is, the Universe Spirit. Now in the third mansion he becomes aware also of a host of celestial intelligences who work on his behalf. This learning is of a revelatory nature, even as Adam and Eve were divine revelation to our races thousands of years ago, and who continue to serve on high, and as was Melchizedek who brought teachings of light and life, and who continues to oversee the welfare of our world, and with the current revelation brought from many celestial teachers and through the scriptures and other sources. How does the devotion of the inner life prepare us for service and achievement? A young person who wants to become a doctor when he or she grows up, and to help the sick, studies at grade school and high school. Only after those does the student begin to see there follows university, graduate school, internship, and ongoing specialized training. Upon entering the third mansions, the soul who desires to be of service discovers a vast, well-organized, well-endowed system of education beyond anything he previously could have conceived. It is celestial and it is real. Once tasting the joys of service, he then discovers opportunities for more service, then increased service, followed by difficult service, even very difficult service, and finally, divine and perfect service. The third mansions are the places of preparation of the inner life for great personal and outward social achievement. In this life we are required to act, and then the consequences of our actions are in the hands of God. If time is spent in the inner life, the soul is prepared and equipped for useful achievements in this world through our occupations and professions, and through our family and social ministry. Although the outer achievements are of value, the goal of the divine spouse for us is something else, our divine human communion and eventual betrothal, fusion as one. We cannot take our laurels and titles to the next world after our time in the flesh is concluded here. The only thing we take is ourselves, our soul, which is the combined creature of our human mind and the divine spirit. Through the ministry of our teachers, it begins to dawn upon the soul its potential to live eternally, if it will but continue on the path of divine communion leading to divine consummation. Such a soul through the exercise of its growing faculties becomes more and more teachable, more and more able to hear the voice of the divine spouse saying, "Come away with me, my beloved, unto the garden of spices." Song of Solomon. A person would be wise to submit to qualified spiritually minded teachers, even if they come to us in unexpected and unorthodox raiment, for they have much to share. As it has been said, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I must pause here, my brothers and sisters, and say I feel like a man with stammering lips and a speech impediment who cannot form his words intelligibly. How else could it be when words attempt to explain that which is rightly beyond language? At one time I expressed the need for teaching and learning, for schooling. But now I must say it becomes more and more plain as we progress through the heavenly mansions of the soul that the teaching of the Spirit is with deep groanings which cannot be uttered. Please be patient with me and try to understand. One of the primary reasons so much teaching is needed is that there are so many pitfalls at every turn. How miserable it can seem to our peace when we come to understand that so often what we excitedly take for divine inspiration is no more than our own thoughts collecting themselves. We would be better to discount the usefulness of all thinking than to mistake our own thoughts to be of divine origin. And many have harmed their pathway in just this manner. As our sensitivity to spirit develops, we learn of many jewels. We learn when teaching or learning, the degree of argument equally diminishes the content of truth. We learn that even the shadow of a hair's turning for an untrue purpose leads to falseness. We learn that the greatest affliction in the universe is to never have been afflicted. O Divine Father, grant that we may keep ourselves always in your light. In worship the creature becomes more like the one worshipped. Upon entering the third mansion and exploring it, we discover it is like the walled gardens of Socrates. As the student listens, the teacher poses a poignant question. Our divine lover draws out from us tenderly a response, and we simply share just what it is we are feeling, and what it is we are thinking. This is often beyond words. This sharing of the inner life with our divine lover is in and of itself the very doing of the divine will. Is not this what all lovers desire of their beloveds? Why is self-forgetfulness preferable to self-examination? And now we come to a very valuable point. Christ the Master taught his disciples against the practice of self-examination, much to their surprise. All the world religions teach this practice in some form. However, self-examination still has as its object the self. The Master was so sublimely self-forgetful that he once said to someone who called him good teacher, "Why do you call me good?" Reposing his life, as he did always, into the hands of the Father, he simply thought only of his Father's goodness, who is the source, the one uncaused cause of all goodness, truth and beauty. He did not think of himself or rate himself on any scale of goodness. His reply was only, "None is good but God." This was not by any means to suggest he himself was not good, but perhaps that such a question is not relevant. We also are taught that words are irrelevant in prayer, but that it is the soul's intent and meaning that is conveyed. Through these two examples we can gain some insight regarding our thinking and speaking habits. If we learn anything in these third mansions, we must learn a new spiritual language. Our divine spouse, who has spanned such a gulf to be always present with us in the very nucleus of our soul, works always to spiritualize our thinking. Here in our private walled garden with our lover we learn a new and living way of thinking. The Afghan poet, Rumi, wrote this about the life of the soul. "I like when the music happens like this. Something in his eye grabs hold of a tambourine in me. Then I turn and lift a violin in someone else, and they turn, and this turning continues. It has reached you now. Isn't that something?" By Rumi, 1207–1273. It becomes less mysterious to us as we learn to no longer continuously apprise and assess our standing, and rather be divinely God-conscious, with our face always turned toward the divine lover of our souls, even as the angels of paradise do always behold the face of the Heavenly Father.
The fourth mansions considers the great love and fellowship among our God-knowing brothers and sisters. We learn more about the divine lover's interest in our human experience. He brought me to his banqueting house, and his banner over me is love. Canticles 2:4. Upon entering the fourth mansion, as with entering each successive house, there is a growing feeling of expectancy and desire coming from the divine spouse toward the beloved to share more, to share all. The sense is as if the divine has waited throughout the reaches of eternity to reveal new and living truth with the beloved. How is our source always present within the soul? To him who believes, out of his innermost being, rivers of living waters shall flow. John 7:38. Water is always found throughout the environs of the mansions, being the universal substance of life and growth, and the power and strength of this flow is unmistakable in the fourth mansion. Upon approaching the door of this mansion is a bowl into which we can gaze to be reminded of the appearance of our true self as reflected upon the shimmering surface of the divine, living water. In the garden courtyard, a great circular pool is filled continuously from its own well directly underneath, from the very source. Whereas in times past we may have thought of our water as imported from a distant mountain, as in a picturesque vision, we now see that the wellspring courses always from within our own being, a spring whose waters fail not. Isaiah 58:11. Each new mansion, closer to the soul's center of divine light, provides rooms and spaces with new and intriguing experiences waiting to be discovered, and yet there are qualities of many rooms that are also familiar to us from earlier mansions. Two things can always be counted upon. It seems, there is always a special place for intimate communion between divine lover and human beloved in this inner life, and, There are always designed opportunities for new truths to be revealed which equip the growing personality to better serve God's purpose in the outer life. The human mind begins here to understand more about the nature, purpose and intent of the divine mystery, and the human mind begins also to glimpse something about its own nature and about its human experience which apparently the divine is very lovingly and rapturously desirous of. The dance of lovers takes on new and very real dimensions and mysterious choreography. The training and equipping in the third mansions had to do with achievements in the social life. Yet, here in the fourth mansions the training is extended to focus particularly on the social relationships with a specialized group of mortals. The God-knowing brotherhood-sisterhood. Ascenders here become conscious of a new social order, one based upon understanding sympathy, mutual appreciation, unselfish love, mutual service, and the overmastering motivation of realizing a common and supreme destiny, the paradise goal of worshipful and divine perfection. Ascenders are all becoming self-conscious of God-knowing, God-revealing, God-seeking, and God-finding. We crave the fellowship and love of our God-conscious brothers and sisters. Kabir, the family man, weaver, reformer and poet of northern India wrote, "There is dew on these poems in the morning, and at night a cool breeze may rise from them. In the winter they are blankets, in the summer a place to swim. I like talking to you like this. Have you moved a step closer? Soon we may be kissing." By Kabir 1440–1518. Although this place of prayer, meditation and worship is privately within our own soul's consciousness, it seems that when we gaze into the overflowing garden-watering pool, like the brass laver of the tabernacle in the wilderness, Exodus 30:18, that we see also the faces of those dear brothers and sisters who likewise in their soul's interior mansions, are congregating and communing just as we are. This is knowing one another in the Spirit, and as fellow souls in the family of God. The fruit of this inward soul understanding is that we more fittingly find our place in the group workings of our spiritually minded brothers and sisters. Here we are introduced to both the demands and the delights of a social life of a higher order, one that is both material and spiritual. These living and healing waters which our divine spouse leads us to are accompanied by a sweetness, quiet, and great peace within. The contentment and delight are felt not as earthly delights are felt, but rather, as the basin completely fills and overflows all the mansion and all our faculties, the flow reaches even to our body with the peace that passes understanding. Philippians 4:7. When this heavenly water flows from our very depths it proceeds to spread within us, opening us to more wondrous blessings so that the soul itself cannot understand all that it receives there. The fragrance it experiences, we might say, is as if there is a censer, of coals on which sweet perfumed incense is cast. The fragrant heat and smoke infuse the entire soul, and even to the body. Christ has shown us the way, He is the door. He is the new and living way, and He is the bread of life. He demonstrated to us a life lived looking always to His Father in heaven. He taught that the kingdom of God is within. Let us not neglect to take time to share the remembrance supper of bread and wine with our brothers and sisters, and to know with assurance that at all such times, the Master is personally and actually present.
The fifth mansions. The soul here makes great progress in its character. The desire of the divine spouse toward us is more fully understood. Spiritual marriage is described. This fifth mansion represents a tremendous forward step in your soul's progress. A real birth of cosmic consciousness takes place within the soul. You are becoming universe-minded. This is indeed a time of expanding horizons. It is beginning to dawn upon your enlarging mind, as an ascending mortal, that some stupendous and magnificent, some supernal and divine destiny awaits all who complete the progressing paradise ascension, which has been so laboriously but so joyfully and auspiciously begun. At this point you begin to manifest bona fide enthusiasm to traverse your heavenly ascent. Study is now becoming voluntary on your part as compared to required, unselfish service is becoming natural to you, and worship is becoming spontaneous not just for pre-planned times and places. A real soul character is budding, a real spiritually infused soul creature is evolving. Why does the indwelling divine spirit of perfection desire human experience? What may be termed a great secret is revealed here by your divine spouse. It is revealed that your divine spouse, existentially perfect and divine, lacks something which you have. The divine, being perfectly existential, desires to overcome the bounds of absoluteness and gain universe experience with you and as part of you. Just as you crave to know God and partake of the eternal and divine, so the divine's presence within you craves to know you and your finite creature experience. They say in love that opposites attract. There could not be two greater opposites, divine and human, existential and experiential, infinite and finite, perfect and evolutionary, God and man. So much of our journey so far has been about our own needs, education, growth and destiny, and so fantastic is this revelation, that it is not surprising we traveled this far before realizing just how much our divine spouse desires and loves us. And that our cooperation and entire dedication is required in order for our divine spouse, a pure spirit, to achieve personality. This is about true spiritual marriage. We now realize the truth and reality about our betrothal, our joint destiny, the infinite possibilities, and the eternal consequences. We also realize how much is at stake. St. Francis wrote, "I hear you singing, dear lover of my soul, inviting me to your limb. I am coming, for all we do is preparation for love. I hear you singing, dear one, inviting me to your embrace. We are coming, dear, for all the work you blessed us with is preparation to know and hold the sacred. I hear you singing, my soul, but how can it be that God's voice has now become my own?" Then my beloved said to me, "That is just a wedding gift for our divine union." By St. Francis of Assisi 1182–1216. Is my divine spouse an individual gift from the Father to me? Each person has her own soul. And, each soul has its own singular divine spouse dwelling within. Each union of a human person with the divine spirit represents the potential for a unique spiritual marriage, a one and only fusion of two becoming one. One of a kind in all the universe of universes. This is eternal life and eternal union. We belong to our divine spouse, brothers and sisters. She will lead us along whatever way she pleases. As we experience truer humility and detachment, I say truer because it must not be in thought alone, for thoughts may deceive us, the divine will grant to us these blessings of soul communion, and many others which we do not even know how to desire. May God be always praised. A person involuntarily closes his eyes, desires solitude, and, without the use of any human skill, there seems gradually to be built for him another soul mansion in which he can make the prayer he longs for. The senses and all external things seem gradually to lose their hold on him, while the soul, on the other hand, attains its greater control. The divine spirit who dwells within these mansions, even through our failings, perceives our good will, and in great mercy desires to bring us into its presence. So like a good shepherd, with a call so gentle that even we can hardly recognize it, He teaches us to know His voice and not go away and get lost, but to return to our mansions. And so sincere is this shepherd's call that we give up the things outside the castle which have led us astray, and once again we enter it. I would not speak to you as spiritual children, but would make more plain the nature of this divine spouse. It is true, Christ has provided for us a body and world to live in, and His bestowed Spirit of truth to guide us in all our searching. And the Divine Mother has provided for us her Holy Spirit to enfold our minds and be always with us. But the Divine Spirit within which I speak of is for of us each individually, and is of paradise origin, the gift from the Father of all. In our inner citadel, the source, the Spirit of the Father comes to us, and has bridged the mighty gulf from paradise to earth. We know Christ has shown to us the Father, and the Holy Spirit has given us the capacity and the mind to know and worship Him. However, do not fail to understand and recognize the presence of your divine betrothal, the Spirit gift of the Father which indwells your mortal mind, and which has given birth to your soul. Let us not fail to seek divine betrothal and marriage, the indissoluble union with our divine counterpart. And, do not make the mistake, upon discovering the universality of the Father in heaven, to fail to realize a ray from that sun strikes upon you and you alone, and to know this is a personal relationship you and your divine spouse enjoy, a glory that no one else knows in the way that you know. We cannot affectionately love a principle or concept, or be in divine communion with a mathematical formula. Only persons can know and love each other. Although God is much more than any concept we may have of personality, we also know that God cannot be anything less than a personality. Your relationship with God is personal, person to person. This is the revelation of the fifth mansions. It is no wonder that dear ones experience this without having consciously sought it. For, in all our searching for the Spirit, the greater truth is the discovery not so much of man seeking God, but of God first seeking and finding man. A monk described to me his experience of solitude in a mountain retreat, during which, with no plan nor thought beforehand, was taken up with a rapture of 11 days with his divine spouse, wherein this very truth of relationship was revealed to him in ever-increasing divine communion and ecstasy, day after day and night after night. Only after these 11 days did he realize he must return to his duties in the city, having experienced the advancement of another psychic circle, or mansion of the interior life of the soul. Only with difficulty and obscurity of human language was he able to describe the soul transformation of such an experience to his dear friends, an experience gained which he did not even know how to seek, and which he did not even know was at all possible. He was also considerably challenged to keep his spiritual development balanced with his intellectual development, as it is so easy for a profound spiritual experience to result in an upheaval of personality equilibrium. Light can blind as well as guide, so let us each look to our soul's health and entrust all to the safe keeping of the Father in heaven.
The sixth mansions. Having come up through great tribulation, the pilgrim's character reveals more of the Father's beauty and goodness. The indwelling Spirit is revealed as the will of God in the soul. We are always both learners and teachers. A working harmony is recognized between the human mind and the indwelling Spirit. The son or daughter of God is becoming more adorable in this stage of development. He or she is truly becoming a marvelous creature. The paucity of human language becomes more apparent now in attempting to describe the glories of doing the divine will, and the changes that such obedience brings about. Although still quite material creatures, upon entering this glorious mansion of the soul there is revealed more of the divine plan of the eternal career of paradise service. Here it becomes increasingly clear that each day's experience is really a part of an unfolding universe life plan of unending joy and possibility. Life is but a day's work. Do it well. How can the child of God ascend to the higher mansions of the soul? Jesus taught, "In my Father's house there are many mansions. If it were not so, I would not have told you." John 14:2. These mansions are truly transition spheres which intervene between the purely material existence and the future status of full spirit creaturehood. These spheres actually exist in the life to come, as true places of spirit education, and upon leaving this earth cradle, after death or translation, we will walk through them. It must be understood that these are soul levels of growth, and therefore are now foretastes of glory divine. Those dedicated souls who choose wholeheartedly to do the Father's will, can in fact know the reality of these progressive mansions of ascension in the inner life of the soul, even while here in the earthly tabernacle. The shadow of the mortal nature becomes less and less as these circles are ascended one by one, and this serves to make mortals very kind and understanding, very sympathetic and tolerant. Any child of God will certainly attest, especially regarding the previous levels of development, that they have come up through great tribulation. Revelation 7:14. But the pilgrim is becoming now more spiritually brilliant, and seriously contemplates the choices laid before him of spiritual ascension. Perhaps the greatest thing is to hear the voice of the Father, as Jesus heard at his baptism, "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased." The Father has always loved us, and in his eternal equipoise has always seen us thus. However, now we have the inner knowing that we are his, and he is well pleased that we walk, not as servants, not as orphans, but as sons and daughters of him, the Father. O brothers and sisters, how can I ever tell the riches and the treasures and delights of these mansions? Sometimes I think it would be better to say nothing of the mansions I have not yet described. And I would be mistaken to say, since these glories are so supernal, that only few may attain them. Actually, this is the pathway of the saints throughout the history of this dispensation, and even if only the doorway is attained, God has shown a great mercy by granting us this favor. Many are called, indeed, but often it seems that few actually make the choice for the divine, the godlike. A saint I know, an accomplished musician, told me that in this state neither art, nor music could grant him inspiration to any further degree. The fine arts are meant, by their illusions, to foreshadow a high and divine reality. But what, when the reality is tasted, can music or art afford? When the thing alluded to has itself been glimpsed, what more can the allegory offer? What further value has the shadow when the substance has been felt, feelingly experienced? Only the realities of spiritual experience on ever-ascending levels can quench the great thirst of the soul which aspires to God within. Attaining the spiritual heights of the sixth mansions only reveals there is a universe of God-knowing yet awaiting the traveling pilgrim of time and space who knows of a certainty the spiritual cosmos of the universal, eternal and infinite God. How sudden the pangs of remorse and decrepitude can inflict the emerging soul who is swept up into the portals of the infinite adventure. How deliriously he wrestles with leaving the partial for the possibilities of the infinite. Such a life on such a planet. We are amazed at how the Master so skillfully and divinely answered the Sadducees and the Pharisees with their questions meant to entrap him. Always he cut through to the center of any question, revealing both their motives and the divine wisdom, which left them in awe and speechless. Even his enemies marveled at his responses, and some made the choice to enter the family of God, while others sought his destruction. So likewise, in every crossroad we encounter, there is the divine answer which reveals our inner thoughts and illuminates how to proceed. Those in the sixth mansions, as in the later phases of the Master's ministry on earth, are confronted with difficult choices. The prayer, "Nevertheless, your will be done," is always appropriate. We struggle with the ancestry of the animal mind attempting to consort with the divine prerogatives. It is our incredible opportunity in this mansion to learn a new and higher response, to say, "It is my will, that, your will, be done." The earlier idea of the kingdom of God is appropriately supplanted by the idea of the will of God. How many have said, "I would do the will of God, if only I knew what it was"? How often we are confronted with two choices, a proverbial fork in the road. We wait and pray about which way to take. A dear brother told me that after nightly calling upon God for a year, finally he heard the directive, "Make your choice, and I will hold your hand and walk with you in your choice." So high are his ways, that we are often perplexed as to why he does not make a choice for us. Yet, how sublime the joy is to know he will walk with us in our earthly path. Let us not tempt the angels of our supervision, through our waffling, to lead us into troublous paths to save our east-drifting souls. Let us not think that through postponement we can evade the valley of decision. When confronted with the question, "Am I my brother's keeper?" whether in the coldest day on the mountain in January, or the hottest desert day in July, the unequivocating answer must be, yes. To whom much is given, is much required, and to the soul in the sixth mansions has been given much, very much. Like in a chain link, there is ever the person below us, and the person above. We teach and nurture the person below, and we receive humbly from the brother above. Response must be immediate and without consternation, sublimely self-forgetful as the Master always was. There is no time or need to let the lesser stew in his confusion. He will have enough of that. The minister of mercy must extend care reflexively to those in need. Ours is the act, the consequence is God's. This supernal knowledge that the infinite God perfectly arranges outcomes is a great liberation to the mercy minister. It frees him to bestow kindness generously. Mercy is that quality which supplies to another all and everything needed to equip, and help, and heal. Love is the desire to help another. Hafiz, the Persian poet, wrote, "I am a hole in a flute that Christ's breath moves through, listen to this music." By Hafiz 1320–1389. All these things happen in the inner life of the soul, the inner mansions. Here in this secret place, in the garden of spices, where the divine spouse is encountered, is where we are led, taken into the wine cellar, and the lover of our soul makes divine love to us. We are transported. Inexplicable things happen here, as in a dream. Sometimes, when a younger brother or sister asks for a thing which must be denied, it is only to more quickly, even kindly, usher him into the streets of the city where he or she can ask, "Where is my lover whom I seek?" And bitterly, sometimes the message is to those who will not follow the divine leading, "Where I go you cannot come." To the pilgrim of the sixth mansion, the divine mandate from paradise, "Be you perfect, even as I am perfect," Matthew 5:48, over and again continues to resound and becomes a mantra of supernal calling, a calling from before the beginning of time from the Father of lights to all creation. This is an incredible time for the ascending mortal and witnesses an actual working harmony and sense of identity between the human mind and the indwelling spirit.
The seventh mansions. The experience on this seventh mansion is the crowning achievement of the spiritual career. During your sojourn here you receive the instruction of teachers who cooperate in the task of preparing you for residence on the heavenly Jerusalem. Any discernible differences between those suffering from isolated and backward conditions and those from more advanced and enlightened upbringing are erased during the sojourn on the seventh mansions. Here you are purged of the remnants of unfortunate heredity, unwholesome environment, and unspiritual life environment. The remnants of the mark of the beast are here eradicated. This level represents the highest possible realization of mind-spirit relationship in the human experience prior to the liberation of the evolving soul from the cloak of the material body. Concerning mind, emotions, and cosmic insight, this achievement of the seventh mansion is the nearest possible approach of material mind and spirit in human experience. Perhaps these psychic circles of mortal progression would be better called cosmic levels, actual meaning grasps, and value realizations of relationship between the evolving soul and the indwelling divine spouse. And it is this very relationship that makes it forever impossible fully to explain the significance of the cosmic circles to the material mind. A person in the first or second mansions can be almost as truly God-knowing sonship conscious as in the seventh mansions, but will be less conscious of experience relating to universe citizenship. Here you become aware of your place, your purpose, and your potentially infinite destiny. What is the nature of the Father's personal contact with the soul? The endowment of imperfect beings with freedom entails inevitable tragedy, and it is the nature of the perfect ancestral deity to affectionately share these sufferings in loving companionship. As far as I am conversant with the affairs of a universe, I regard the love and devotion of an indwelling divine spirit as the most truly divine affection in all creation. The love of the sons in their ministry to the races is superb, but the devotion of the Father's gift to the individual is touchingly sublime, divinely father-like. The Paradise Father has apparently reserved this form of personal contact with his individual creatures as an exclusive creator prerogative. And there is nothing in all the universe of universes exactly comparable to the marvelous ministry of these pure entities that so fascinatingly indwell the children of the evolutionary planets. If the indwelling spirit resides in the superconscious, how can we know its presence? Largely unrecognized by the conscious mind, the divine spirit adjuster constantly communicates with the human partner, especially during those sublime experiences of the worshipful contact of mind with spirit in the higher consciousness. I wish it were possible for me to help evolving persons to achieve a better understanding and attain a fuller appreciation of the unselfish and superb work of the divine gifts living within them, who are so devoutly faithful to the task of fostering our spiritual welfare. These monitors are efficient ministers to the higher phases of our minds. They are wise and experienced manipulators of the spiritual potential of the human intellect. These heavenly helpers are dedicated to the stupendous task of guiding you safely inward and upward to the celestial haven of happiness. These tireless toilers are consecrated to the future triumph of divine truth in your life everlasting. They are the watchful workers who pilot the God-conscious human mind away from the shoals of evil while expertly guiding the evolving soul of man toward the divine harbors of perfection on far distant and eternal shores. The adjusters are loving leaders, your safe and sure guides through the dark and uncertain mazes of your short earthly career. They are the patient teachers who so constantly urge their subjects forward in the paths of progressive perfection. They are the careful custodians of the sublime values of creature character. I wish you could love them more, cooperate with them more fully, and cherish them more affectionately. Although the divine indwellers are chiefly concerned with your spiritual preparation for the next stage of the never-ending existence, they are also deeply interested in your temporal welfare and in your real achievements on earth. They are delighted to contribute to your health, happiness and true prosperity. They are interested in your success in all matters of advancement which are not counter to your future life of eternal progress. Today you are passing through the period of the courtship of your divine spouse. And if you only prove faithful to the trust placed in you by the divine spirit who seeks your mind and soul in eternal union, there will eventually ensue that soul oneness, that supernal harmony, that cosmic coordination, that divine attunement, that celestial fusion, that never-ending blending of identity, that oneness of being which is so perfect and final that even the most experienced personalities can never segregate, or recognize as separate identities the fusion partners. Mortal man and divine spirit. What part does the human will play in this courtship with the divine spirit? When divine gifts indwell human minds, they bring with them the model careers, the ideal life plans for those they indwell. Thus they begin work with a definite and predetermined plan for the intellectual and spiritual development of their human partners, but it is not incumbent upon any human being to accept this plan. You are at full liberty to reject any part or all of the Divine Spirit's predestined program. It is your Divine Spirit's mission to effect such mind changes and to make such spiritual adjustments as you may willingly and intelligently authorize, but under no circumstances does your spirit ever take advantage of you or in any way arbitrarily influence you in your choices and decisions. The Divine Spirit respects your sovereignty of personality, and is always subservient to your will. They are persistent, ingenious, and perfect in their methods of work, but they never do violence to the volitional selfhood of their hosts. No human being will ever be spiritualized by a divine spirit monitor against his will. Survival is a gift of God which must be desired by the creatures of time. In the final analysis, whatever the adjuster has succeeded in doing for you, the records will show that the transformation has been accomplished with your cooperative consent. You will have been a willing partner with the Divine Spirit in the attainment of every step of the tremendous transformation of the ascension career. The Divine Spirit of your mind is not trying to control your thinking, as such, but rather to spiritualize it, to eternalize it. The divine gifts are dedicated to improving, modifying, adjusting, and coordinating your thinking processes, but more especially and specifically they are devoted to the work of building up spiritual counterparts of your careers, soul transcripts of your true advancing selves, for eternal survival purposes. Everything of lasting value in your memory and experience, and those things only, will go with you into the next life. There are, therefore, two realities which center in the human mind circuits, one, a mortal self, the other, an immortal entity from paradise, an indwelling gift from God. But the mortal self is also a personal self, it has personality. You as a personal creature have mind and will. The indwelling spirit is divine and therefore has mind and will of another dimension and order. If you so fully conform to the indwelling spirit's mind that you see eye to eye, then your minds become one. Subsequently, if your will orders the decisions of this new or combined mind, the spirit's potentially personal will attains to personality expression through your decision, and as far as that particular project is concerned, you and the Divine Spirit Monitor are one. Your mind has attained to divinity attunement, and the monitor's will has achieved personality expression. Please pause to realize what a great gift this is, actually the only possible gift the creature could give to God. To the extent that this identity is realized, you are mentally approaching the soul order of existence. Soul mind is a term signifying the cooperating minds of diversely material and spiritual natures. Soul intellect, therefore, connotes a dual mind dominated by one will. And with mortals this will, human in origin, is becoming divine through man's identification with the mindedness of God. Meera, the most renowned woman poet of India, penned these words. He left his fingerprint on a glass the earth drinks from. Every religion has studied the shape of that fingerprint. Churches and temples use the geometry of those lines to establish rites and laws and prayers and our ideas of the universe. I guess there is just no telling how out of hand and wonderfully wild things will get when our lips catch up to his. By Mir of 1489 to 1550. How can I cooperate with my indwelling divine guide? The divine guides are playing out the sacred and superb adventure of time in space. And how happy they are when your cooperation permits them to lend assistance in your short struggles of time as they continue to undertake their larger tasks of eternity. But usually, during the first 4 of the soul mansions, when your guide attempts to communicate with you, the message is lost in the material currents of human mind. Only occasionally do you catch a faint and distant echo of the divine voice. Here in the 7th mansion, new and greatly increased possibilities of communion and communication with the divine spouse are realized. The parable of the silkworm. The incredible silkworm feeds only upon mulberry leaves and begins to spin its single thread about 2,000 feet long. Through its diligence of daily work, a protective cocoon is spun of strong, thin thread. Then the worm dies unto itself and emerges through its metamorphosis into the sunshine as a white moth. The silk thread is used to make the finest cloth and even strings for musical instruments. Through the deepening life of the silkworm we see an example of the soul deep in prayer. Give us this day our daily bread, and, your will be done. Rumi, the mystic Islamic poet, wrote, I stood before a silkworm one day. And that night my heart said to me, I can do things like that, I can spin skies, I can be woven into love that can bring warmth to people, I can be soft against a crying face, I can be wings that lift, and I can travel on my 1,000 feet throughout the earth, my sex filled with the sacred. And I replied to my heart, Dear heart, can you really do all those things? And my heart just nodded, yes, in silence. And so we began, and will never cease. By the poet Rumi. The success of your guide in the enterprise of piloting you through the mortal life and bringing about your survival depends not so much on the theories of your beliefs as upon your decisions, determinations, and steadfast faith. These movements of personality growth are powerful influences aiding your advancement because they help you to cooperate with a guide, they assist you in ceasing to resist. The divine guides succeed in their terrestrial undertakings just insofar as mortals succeed or fail to cooperate with the plan to advance along the ascending path of perfection attainment. The secret of survival is wrapped up in the supreme human desire to be godlike and in the willingness to do and be any and all things essential to the final attainment of that overmastering desire. I cannot help but observe that so many of us spend so much time and thought on mere trifles of living, while almost wholly overlooking the more essential realities of everlasting importance. Those very accomplishments which are concerned with the development of a more harmonious working agreement between us and our divine guide. The great goal of human existence is to attune to the divinity of the indwelling spirit. The great achievement of mortal life is the attainment of a true and understanding consecration to the eternal aims of the divine spirit who waits and works within your mind. A devoted effort to realize eternal destiny is wholly compatible with a light-hearted and joyous life and with a successful and honorable career on earth. Cooperation with the divine guide does not involve self-torture, mock piety, or hypocritical and ostentatious self-abasement. The ideal life is one of loving service, not an existence of fearful apprehension. Confusion, being puzzled, even sometimes discouraged and distracted, doesn't necessarily signify resistance to the leadings of the indwelling spirit. Such attitudes may sometimes connote lack of active cooperation with the divine guide and may, therefore, somewhat delay spiritual progress, but such intellectual emotional difficulties do not in the least interfere with the certain survival of the God-knowing soul. Ignorance alone can never prevent survival, neither can confusional doubts or fearful uncertainty. Only conscious resistance to the guide's leading can prevent the survival of the evolving immortal soul. How can I actively improve cooperation with the Divine Presence? You must not regard cooperation with the Divine Presence of the Father as a particularly conscious process, for it is transcendent to thought. It is your motives and your decisions, your faithful determinations and your supreme desires, that constitute real and effective cooperation. You can consciously augment harmony by choosing to respond to divine leading, sincerely basing the human life on the highest awareness of truth, beauty, and goodness, and then coordinating these divine qualities through wisdom, worship, faith, and love. Loving God and desiring to be like Him, genuine recognition of the divine fatherhood and loving worship of the heavenly parent. Loving man and sincerely desiring to serve him, wholehearted recognition of the brotherhood of man coupled with an intelligent and wise affection for each of your fellows. How may I avoid mistakes in understanding the leadings of the indwelling Divine Spirit? Do not confuse the mission of the indwelling Spirit with what is commonly called conscience. They are not directly related. Conscience is a human faculty. It is not to be despised, but it is hardly the voice of God to the soul. Conscience admonishes you to do right, but the divine guide, in addition, endeavors further to tell you what is right. Man's dream experiences, that disordered and disconnected parade of the uncoordinated sleeping mind, present adequate proof of the inability of the divine to harmonize the divergent factors of the mind of man. The divine guide simply cannot, in a single lifetime, arbitrarily coordinate and synchronize two such unlike types of thinking as the human and the divine. When they do, as they sometimes have, such souls are translated directly to the mansion worlds without the necessity of passing through the experience of death, such as occurred with Enoch and Elijah. During slumber the Divine Spirit attempts to achieve only what the will of the indwelt personality has previously fully approved by the decisions made during times of fully wakeful consciousness, and which have thereby become lodged in the realms of the higher mind, the liaison domain of human and divine relationship. While their human hosts are asleep, the divine guides try to register their creative ideas in the higher levels of the material mind, and some of your grotesque dreams show a failure to make efficient contact. The absurdities of dream life not only testify to pressure of unexpressed emotions but also bear witness to the distortion of spiritual concepts presented by the divine. Your own passions and urges can translate into the dream picture and substitute themselves for the divine messages which the indwellers are endeavoring to put into the psychic records during unconscious sleep. It is dangerous to conjecture regarding the spirit content of the dream life. The guides do work during sleep, but your ordinary dream experiences are psychologic phenomena. Likewise, it is hazardous to attempt to sort the divine spirit's concepts from the continuous dictations of human conscience. These are problems which will have to be solved through individual discrimination and personal decision. But a son or daughter of God would do better to err in rejecting a divine guide's expression through believing it to be a purely human experience, than to blunder into exalting a thought of the mortal mind to the sphere of divine dignity. Increasingly as you ascend the psychic circles, sometimes directly, but more often indirectly, you do communicate with your indwelling divine spirit. But it is dangerous to entertain the idea that every new concept originating in the human mind is the dictation of the spirit. I recall an instance in which a dear sister in Christ felt she received guidance that several of her friends were to join her in a desert sojourn. She was in an agitated state brought on by much fasting, chanting, prayer and little sleep. The timing and arrangements were such that not all her friends were able to comply. Later she continued the calling for them to join her in a certain remote mountain location. Her friends were unable to comply and a distrust regarding her guidance developed. More often, that which you accept as the Spirit's voice is in reality the emanation of your own intellect. This is dangerous ground, and every person must settle these problems for himself in accordance with his natural human wisdom and superhuman insight. While the voice of the adjuster is ever within you, most will hear it seldom during a lifetime. Human beings below the fifth and sixth mansions of attainment rarely hear the Spirit's direct voice except in moments of supreme desire, in a supreme situation, and consequent upon a supreme decision. The great days in the individual careers of divine monitors are, first, when the human partner breaks through into the fifth mansion or psychic circle, which ensures the monitor's increased range of function, then, when the human partner attains the seventh mansion, and they are thereby enabled to intercommunicate, at least to some degree, and last, when they are finally and eternally fused. How does the soul achieve immortality, eternal life? The discovery of the seventh mansion does not yet equal fusion with the divine spouse. There are many mortals living on earth who have attained their circles, but fusion depends on yet other greater spiritual achievements, upon the attainment of a final and complete attunement of the mortal will with the will of God as it is resident in the indwelling spirit. When a person has completed the circles of cosmic achievement, and further, when the final choosing of the mortal will permits the divine spirit to complete the association of human identity with the soul during the physical life, then do such consummated liaisons of soul and divine spirit go on immediately to the mansion worlds. When such a fusion occurs during the physical life, then instantly the material body is consumed. Persons who might witness such a spectacle would only observe the translating mortal disappear in chariots of fire as did Enoch and Elijah, and as have many saints since, including up to the present day. However, most often this fusion occurs after mortal death. Following spiritual marriage, the divine gifts share your destiny and experience, they are you. After the fusion of the immortal soul and the associated divine spirit, all of the experience and all of the values of the one eventually become the possession of the other, so that the two are actually one entity. In a certain sense, this new being is of the eternal past as well as for the eternal future. All that was once human in the surviving soul and all that is divine in the divine spirit now become the actual possession of the new and ever-ascending universe personality. An absolute oneness with the divine, a complete exhaustion of the endowment of the divine spouse, can only be achieved in eternity following the final attainment of the universal Father, the Father of spirits, ever the source of these divine gifts. When the evolving soul and the divine spirit are finally and eternally fused, each gains all of the valued experience qualities of the other. This coordinate personality possesses all of the experiential memory of survival value once held by the mortal mind and soul. But it will require an eternity of the future for an adjuster ever completely to endow the personality partnership with the meanings and values which the divine monitor carries forward from the eternity of the past. And take heart, dear ones, those things which we wish here to forget but cannot, will be forgotten in eternity. But with the vast majority of persons the indwelling spirit must patiently await the arrival of death, deliverance, must await the liberation of the emerging soul from the nearly complete domination by the energy patterns inherent in the material order of existence. The divine gifts rejoice to make contact with the mortal mind, but they must be patient through the long years of silent sojourn during which they are unable to break through animal resistance and directly communicate with you. But never can they greet you, in the flesh, with the same full and sympathetic affection as they will when you discern them mind to mind on the mansion worlds which Christ promised await us. After the eternal fusion, you and the Divine Spirit are one, you are not distinguishable as separate beings. What would my Divine Spirit like me to know? If the reader would grant me some poetic license, I would like to relate, conceptually, what the Spirit would like us to know, in the form of an appealing admonition. And now, without injury or jeopardy to the subject of my devotion and without intent to over-chastise or discourage, this is my plea to him. That he more faithfully give me his sincere cooperation, more cheerfully endure the tasks of my emplacement, more faithfully carry out the program of my arrangement, more patiently go through the trials of my selection, more persistently and cheerfully tread the path of my choosing, and more humbly receive credit that may accrue as a result of my ceaseless endeavors. Upon him I bestow the supreme devotion and affection of Divine Spirit. I will function with wisdom and power until the very end, until the last earth struggle is over. I will be true to my personality trust. And I exhort him to survival, not to disappoint me, not to deprive me of the reward of my patient and intense struggle. On the human will our achievement of personality depends. Circle by circle I have patiently ascended this human mind. Circle by circle I am passing on to judgment. I await with pleasure and without apprehension the roll call of destiny. I am prepared to submit all to the tribunals of the ancients. Dear brothers and sisters, I commend you to God and your personal prayer and devotional times together. May your inner life of the soul grow sweeter with each passing day. May you become a better righteousness recommender today than you were yesterday. May you learn to love even just one more person today.
The End. Healing Waters, February, 2011. Brother Joshua. Acknowledgements. The writings of the Bible, Saint Teresa of Avila, and the Urantia book are freely and unabashedly quoted throughout this work, and their insight and inspiration is fully acknowledged.